It's been a while since I've made a guide, and I try to keep my guides extremely digestible, but the slasher genre has proven to be really difficult for new players to understand and apply all of the information thrown at them. When you just start out, it's just information overload. You hear about drags, excels, counters, feints, and then you try to apply all of those concepts in a game, and it's just impossible. So today, I'm going to break down the different levels of players that you're going to see in Chivalry 2, from a fresh install to a top of the board player. I'll go over the specific skills each level of player needs to focus on to improve their tier, along with the weaknesses associated with being stagnant and not improving your play. I'm confident with an hour a day of focused practice, a few days a week, I can take almost any player from a total noob to a seasoned veteran. Welcome to the Chivalry 2 edition of Noob to Pro. Our bottom of the barrel Chivalry 2 players are the deer in headlights, fresh installs. These players are very late to the game, and coming into the game this late, they tend to be of the more casual variety. They may or may not have played the tutorial, but they definitely have zero understanding of the combat mechanics. These are the guys you see ending a team objective match with only 5 kills in 30 minutes, the complete deer in headlights players who can and will attack at any time, or will just back away confused, holding down the block key and doing nothing. Level 0 Chivalry 2 players, we're going to call you the Timmies. The game throws a lot of different concepts at you, but what the Timmies really struggle with is understanding the concept of initiative. Chivalry 2, it's actually a turn-based game like something like Hearthstone, which sounds extremely weirdly to say. But there's actually a proper time when you're supposed to attack. It's basically like you have a turn. But how do you know when it's actually your turn? And it's kind of easy. When you block or counter an attack, it's now your turn. Correctly attacking back directly after a riposte gives your attack a slight speed boost, allowing you to hold the initiative. So you just attacked on your turn. After you make this attack, your opponent now should have the initiative and your turn is finished. For our level 0 Timmies, understanding this concept and consciously focusing on getting in the game and only attacking while you have the right to attack will instantly cut out a good portion of your deaths. While your base understanding of initiative improves, I would stick to just using light attacks, singular heavy attacks, or even light feints just to ensure that you hold your initiative, since there are some weapon combinations that can break the laws, and we call this gamblers. Ultimately, Timmies are the easiest kills in the game, and anyone worth their salt will realize immediately they have no idea what they're doing and simply attack in turn, waiting for them to break initiative, and they're just basically free kills. However, once you have this base layer understanding of initiative, you graduated to a level 1, and we're going to just call these bad players. A bad player will rely heavily on ripostes, and they might even use some feints and drags on offense. However, they tend to lack the ability to properly defend themselves. These players rely so much on just riposte, swing, that they're very susceptible to two things. Now, a level 1 will tend to be able to kill Timmies regularly just by obeying the law of initiative. However, because of their singular focus on riposting and then attacking, they are very susceptible to two things: running out of stamina and being kicked. Every time you riposte or perform an action, you lose stamina. How to lessen this is by landing hits or performing what we call counters. Countering is the preferred form of defense in the game. To counter, you need to recognize what attack your enemy is throwing at you while tapping block to mirror it. You'll notice your defense bar in the middle of the screen turns blue. Countering negates the stamina loss from blocking and it'll keep your weapon in your hands. The lack of ability to counter is why bad players will almost always be empty-handed extremely quickly when encountering a player who actually knows what they're doing. This focus on blocking also leads bad players to be very susceptible to being kicked. Bad players get so in the habit of holding on the block, waiting for a strike, that they'll be kicked over and over and over again. This leads to them thinking that kicking is overpowered, when really all you have to do is see the kick and throw a strike to counter it. The players who spam my comment sections on TikTok and YouTube asking me why I'm not kicking more in some of these fights are probably level 1 bad players. Now, to advance from being a level 1 shitter, you need to do one thing: go into lobby and just focus on countering the basic slash attack. Slashes are the most commonly used attack in Chivalry 2, and they're the easiest attack to counter. If you spend a few days trying to counter every single slash that comes at you and become proficient in it, you've now opened the doors into being able to sustain kill streaks and engagements. You'll die trying to learn the timing, you might die a lot, but there is no progression in Chivalry without learning how to counter attacks. Now, when you've successfully learned to counter slash attacks, you've graduated to level 2 of a Chivalry player, and I'll call this your average Joe. And I'm calling this average because there is so much about the game still to learn, but the reality of the situation that is, if you put in the work to just learn how to counter slash attacks, you're probably already a top 10 player on your team in public lobbies because everyone else is so terrible. These average Joe players, they'll have understandings of the concepts of initiative, they can keep their weapon in their hands for more than 5 seconds, and they may have learned some basic offensive maneuvers that can be kind of tricky. However, these average players are still destroyed by more experienced players because their ability to counter is still very basic. Better players will throw a variety of strikes in both the heavy and light forms, along with feints, drags, and excels. The average player will get overwhelmed by this and quickly dispatched. To solve this problem, an average player needs to focus on learning how to counter every attack in the game, so not just slashes, but overheads and stabs as well. To do this, you either go into the lobby with the sole focus on countering every attack thrown at you. This is the approach I took when the game released, and it obviously led me to die a lot, but I got pretty proficient in countering. Or you can grab a friend, go into an empty server browser, and just start throwing attacks at each other and get kind of some refined practice on just what you want to work on, which is countering. If you can learn how to counter all 3 of the basic attacks, overheads, slashes, and stabs, you're probably ready to graduate to a level 3 veteran. Veterans are generally top 5 on the board in public lobbies. These players, they attack in proper turns, they have a few offensive tricks that they really love, but most importantly, they can defend themselves really well. Veterans will also start to be able to recognize when they messed up and will implement the jab maneuver to interrupt enemy attacks. This can make veterans turn into a longer fight, and killing them requires pressure or more complex offensive maneuvers. However, even veterans will tend to have a weakness in their game, and that is not understanding the concept of a counter feint. Lacking this knowledge makes them susceptible to animation disguised feints and feinted drags. In Chivalry 2, when throwing an attack, you can feint it into another attack. This is one of the first things that the tutorial teaches you. However, what many do not know or have not become proficient in is using feints on defense. All of us will sometimes counter too fast and fall for a feint. Now, usually this means you're screwed and you're eating a sword to the face. However, Chivalry 2 offers a mechanic if you're knowledgeable and fast enough to save you in this situation. It's called a counter feint. So, say your opponent throws a stab. You go to counter it, but guess what? They feinted it into a slash. If you're fast enough to recognize this, you can also feint your stab into a slash, and you'll successfully get that blue bar for a counter. This is where I recommend players heading into the server browser and practicing a bit against some of the better 1 versus 1 players, as they'll hit you with some shit, forcing you to either learn to counter feint or die repeatedly. Spending time consciously practicing this maneuver will bring you to a rank 4, which is our team objective Chads. Now, if you consciously spent some time practicing each technique we've gone over in the different tiers to help you advance to becoming a better player, and you've made it up here to tier 4 of a Chad, you're better than the extreme majority of players you will ever encounter in a public lobby. Now, notice I didn't spend too much time talking about offense maneuvers. If team objective is your main mode, I think you could be very bread and butter with your offensive concepts and just use like target switching, active parry, and just target selection, because they're way more important than learning how to rainbow drag. I'm a firm believer that the defense leads into the offense, and if you're able to really well defend yourself, you can keep your offenses limited and still do extremely well. But if you do make it to this point where you're now a Chad, feel free to look through some of my more advanced guides and tutorials on techniques and footworks to begin developing your game even further. And if you're feeling really Chad-like, you can come get humbled in one of the server browser events where even Chads find out that there are levels to this shit. Now, if you stuck with me this long, I hope I earned your subscription. Champ out.